So it's essential for human health. We all have some cobalt inside of us right now. It's part of vitamin B12. It's superior kind of wear resistance and thermal strength means it has applications from alloys and plating to use in magnets and medicinal applications where, so for example, some hip replacements can be up to 50% cobalt because of its wear resistance, but it's also used in electronic components, famously cobalt blue inks and pigments. But actually 55% of all cobalt today goes into lithium-ion rechargeable batteries. Which I noted was a discussion point at the end of the last conversation. Cobalt in electric vehicles is quite a big difference in terms of quantities compared to cobalt in your phone, just in terms of the overall quantities being used. So it is comprising an increasingly large part of the market and expected to grow over time. So just a quick overview then of the cobalt market.
We have similar examples in the past where this has happened and where there has been a temporary period where a intermediate feed product has been linked to the price of the final metal product, such as alumina and aluminium, where this market grew for many years with alumina being priced on the price of aluminium metal. And so today we have hydroxide quoted as a percentage of a cobalt metal price. But you have a situation, as Mike explained, where metal demand is a bit lower this year and last year, mainly because of the COVID implications. But the supply demand of hydroxide is extremely tight. And you have payables for hydroxide, which traditionally run at around 75% of the metal price. Those payables are now around 90, which is abnormal and probably not sustainable in my view. So I think we're going to see a huge shift in how this product is priced, and I believe that hydroxide will, within the next 2 years, switch to being a price that has its own high dollar price and its own low dollar price.
The refinery here, you can see a picture. As I said, it's already constructed. What we're doing is essentially designing the expansion of the refinery with raw material flexibility in mind. So we currently have 5-year contracts for DRC origin hydroxide from 2 or potentially 3 mines, but essentially the supply will come from Glencore and from CMOC via IXM. That is established. We will produce 5,000 tons of cobalt contained in sulfate, so that's about 25,000 tons of sulfate, but we do have an expansion possibility as we ramp up the project in phase 2. So we could potentially, within a quite a brief period, produce up to 6,500 tons of the cobalt containing cobalt in sulfate. In terms of the recycling side, obviously we can extract cobalt already. We also have nickel and copper extraction circuits. So what we're currently considering is installing lithium, manganese, and graphite circuits and looking at what sort of product would come out of these circuits. Is it lithium carbonate? Is it graphite filter cake? And what are the actual markets for these products? So that's currently under investigation internally. We're also very globally competitive when it comes to operating costs. We are definitely in the lower half of the global cost curve in terms of OPEX. I wouldn't say first quartile. That's held by the very, very big Chinese refineries, not all of them, but 1 or 2. But I would say we're safely in the second quartile of the cost curve and with industry leading ESG.
Yes, I mean, the first time we heard of cobalt being used in rechargeable batteries was actually at a Cobalt Institute conference in Tokyo in 2000. And an engineer from Sony who was involved in the battery development for Walkmans at the time and potentially the first new mobile phones said that if cobalt prices went above $10 a pound, that they would substitute cobalt out and find another solution. Since then, cobalt's been as high as $52 a pound and is today around $20 a pound. There is something unique about cobalt. We've had the same discussions about cobalt being substituted out of superalloys in aeroplane engines. And the unique properties of cobalt means that actually the price has to be extremely high for that to make any sense. If you substitute nickel, for example, into cobalt alloys, you have to take the plane out of service every 3 months instead of every 6 months. So there's other implications, and I think cobalt has a similar role in rechargeable NCM batteries, where it provides thermal stability, and although heavier and potentially more expensive than nickel, makes for a much more safe, long-term safe battery, which safety is obviously a key consideration. Having said that, I do think that when cobalt goes above $30 a pound, it does start changing the dynamics, and we see a lot more supply coming out of the DRC, where artisanal mining ramps up. Every producer who's producing copper, will be trying to produce as much cobalt as possible. So we do see that resistance, and of course we fully understand that, but it's the nature of a product that is a byproduct, that the price swings are probably more exaggerated than one of the base metals because supply does not respond immediately to price movements in cobalt.
So it's a good question. I guess the answer to that is the crucial part is percentage-wise, because obviously what we're seeing at the minute is a lot of growth in the demand for cobalt. Anticipating is 4 to 5 times more cobalt in 2030 annually than we use today. So I guess the answer to that question partly comes from, well, where is the new supply being brought on stream? Now, I mentioned in my presentation that there are other sources of it. Australia actually has very significant reserves of cobalt, and Canada has reasonable reserves as well. So there are a number of different places where that supply can be brought on stream. And what we're seeing at the minute is a geopolitical push in North America and in the EU to try and diversify the sourcing of that. Now, it's too early to say what the impact of that will be, but I do think it's possible that part of the incentives those governments might create is to try and increase the amount that's coming from elsewhere. So there's a question, well, okay, to what extent is that new supply going to come on stream from the free market? And to what extent will it be directed by governments for geopolitical reasons? I don't know the answer to that. But certainly what we do know is that there is significant additional reserves that can be brought on stream in the DRC. So it's entirely possible for it to come there. Of course, one of the big challenges that Michael referred to is when you try and bring on stream supply from elsewhere, you obviously have permitting and other issues that Western companies have to deal with that makes those things more difficult.